You're listening to the Herald Scotland podcast, read each day for blind and partially sighted people by the volunteers at Q and Review Print Speaking to the Blind. Coming up in today's edition.
Sport, football. Reaction to Scottish Cup draw shows the Old Firm rivalry is as ferocious as before. The article is by Graham McPherson. Sport, rugby. Pressure could be paralysing for England, says Scotland coach Nathan Hines. The article is by Stuart Bathgate. Sport, tennis. Jamie Murray lands doubles title in Acapulco. The article is by Hayley Milne. Sport, golf. Dustin Johnson enjoyed the high life off the course, now he's enjoying it on the course too. The article is by Nick Roger.
Opinion. The hard facts on council funding. Opinion. Walking through quicksand in quest to keep our school in the community. By Paula Spears, Keep St Joseph's in Milgai campaign. Opinion. Government should be ashamed of this chronic pain scandal. Opinion. A tribute and a warning on the long fight for equality.
Business. Mega merger fuels share price surge. This article is by Scott Wright. Business. Herald entrepreneur. Global logistics is a family affair for Mika. The article is by Marianne Taylor.
News. Church and community leaders warn of subtle sectarianism in Scotland's independence debate. Article by Jerry Braden. News. Mother of Scots keeper Sarah Maclay, killed by tiger, says South Lakes Safari Zoo should close. News. Calls to come clean over Scots' job losses in Standard Life Aberdeen merger. News. Facebook under fire over failure to remove sexualised pictures of children. Politics. Alex Salmond was wrong on oil is a bonus claim. SNP Independence Review Chief Andrew Wilson admits. Politics. Peers warn May that Brexit legislative process must have full parliamentary scrutiny and safeguard union. Politics. Non-candidate launches Green's local election campaign. Politics. SNP face independence referendum at worst possible time, says former leader Gordon Wilson.
Arts and entertainment. The lessons of a theatrical life. The article is by Neil Cooper. Arts and entertainment. Music review. Vienna Tonkussler Orchestra at the Usher Hall in Edinburgh. Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Sport, football. Reaction to Scottish Cup draw shows the Old Firm rivalry is as ferocious as before. The article is by Graham McPherson. The argument that Celtic versus Rangers doesn't matter as much these days isn't borne out by the frenzy that materialises any time the fixture comes around. Celtic fans will continue to insist the concept of the Old Firm has been defunct since Rangers went into liquidation in 2012, spent several years grubbing around in the lower leagues before winning promotion to the top flight last summer. Even the Parkhead club in their official communiques now refer to the match against their deadliest rivals as the Glasgow Derby, placing it on a par with contests against Partick Thistle and Queen's Park. The debate over whether Rangers are legally, historically and financially the same club or not will endure until the cows have come home, had their supper and gone to bed. That will never change. But what is indisputable is that there is a team called Rangers playing out of Ibrox in light blue strips, and that the enmity between both sets of supporters is as bitter now as it was prior to Rangers' financial meltdown 5 years ago. The gleeful reaction from the Celtic supporters following the 3 victories their team has secured over them this season did not suggest that these have been achieved against a new insignificant rival, or were humdrum wins over just another Premiership foe. As much as they may not wish to admit it, these were results that meant something tangibly more. Sunday's draw for the semi-finals of the William Hill Scottish Cup means there will be another 3 of these Glasgow derbies before the season is out. Each will involve the same feverish build-up, be the centre of extensive focus during the 90 minutes, and will produce page upon page of post-match analysis. There will not be a ticket to be had for love nor money at either end of each ground. The first 2 contests in particular will be hugely significant. Celtic are inching ever closer to completing the formalities on their 6th championship in succession, and a win over Rangers this Sunday will take them almost to the finish line. The Ibrox side, who could well have a new manager in place by then, would love nothing more than to halt that momentum by handing Celtic a first domestic defeat of the campaign. The second meeting will be that semi-final tie at Hampden next month. Again, there will be a special resonance attached to it. Celtic are now just 2 wins away from completing a first treble since 2001, but must first navigate their way beyond a Rangers team who, lest anyone has forgotten, knocked them out of the same competition at the same stage last season. Celtic fans, though, will argue that a Celtic team managed by Brendan Rodgers is a far more formidable beast to the one helmed by Ronnie Dyler last April. The final part of the remaining Old Firm trilogy of matches will take place after the split at Ibrox on an as-yet-to-be-decided date. The league will be won by then, and only one side will be looking forward to the Scottish Cup final, but even with little consequence riding on it, it will likely be seen as frenetic as before. Having more than the standard 4 meetings between the clubs in a season is not a new thing. In 2010-11, the sides played each other 7 times. A tempestuous replay settled their Scottish Cup square-off, while in 2004-05 they crossed swords on 6 different occasions. Each one of those games was as eagerly anticipated as the one that preceded it. Perhaps the biggest difference this time around is that these fixtures are no longer taking place on a level playing field. 6 seasons ago, when they faced off 7 times, Rangers won 2 of the games, Celtic won 3 and the other 2 were drawn. In 2004-05, the teams shared 3 victories apiece. It was an era in which there was very little to separate them. Now it is a lot easier to label the favourite and the underdog in this battle. Rangers, buoyed by that Scottish Cup semi-final win at the end of last season, had hoped the previous duopoly would be immediately restored this season, a return to the days of 2 sides duking it out for the title. The reality, though, has been something different. Celtic ran out comfortable 5-1 winners in the opening league game, needed a late Moussa Dembele goal to squeeze into the League Cup final, then came from behind to win the league match at Ibrox on Hogmanay. Now firmly in their stride, Rodgers' side will be expected to go on to further assert their dominance over their rivals in the 3 derbies still to come. The Rangers fans may come to approach these games with a slight sense of dread, but the anticipation on both sides will still tingle as before. That is something that will never change. This article was by Graham McPherson. Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Sport, rugby. Pressure could be paralysing for England, says Scotland coach Nathan Hines. The article is by Stuart Bathgate. Scotland assistant coach Nathan Hines believes that England could find the pressure of going for a record 18th consecutive Test win paralysing when the sides meet at Twickenham on Saturday. Victory over Italy in their last Six Nations Championship outing made it 17 wins in a row for Eddie Jones's side, just 1 short of the All Blacks record for a leading international side. Lifting the Calcutta Cup, then completing another Grand Slam by defeating Ireland, would therefore make England sole record holders with 19 wins. But Hines can recall from his own playing days in France when a winning streak became a burden. When I was at Clermont, we had a run of 77 wins in a row at home, he said yesterday. That is a burden sometimes. The pressure of, am I going to be part of the team that loses this record, can be paralysing at times. You went into a game thinking, I don't want to be part of that team. My experience was that you knew there was more expectation, more pressure. You knew a loss was probably coming, but you didn't know when. The pressure on England in their last outing came largely from the Italians opting not to contest the ruck, a tactic that meant they could swarm around the breakdown instead of observing the usual offside line, and that left Dylan Hartley and colleagues scratching their heads for the first half. Hines declined to explain precisely how Scotland will contest the breakdown, although the fact that England eventually learned to deal with the Italians' ploy is likely to mean it will not be used consistently by anyone else for a while. As for how many men we put in, I don't know, the assistant coach said. The thing that Italy did, it forces coaches and players to think differently at the breakdown. So well done to Italy for chucking that in the mix. Now it forces every other team to say, well, if this happens, what are we going to do about it? That's not a bad thing. It's a surprising plan, obviously, more surprising for England than anyone else. But I think they sorted it out. They obviously know the rule now, so that's good. This is what happens when people try to push the laws. They find a little loophole people weren't aware of. It then gets tidied up and teams are wise to it. It just means it attracts everyone's attention, which is good. Would any other team in the world have done better at adapting to that? It was a pretty unorthodox thing to come up against. It does take a bit of time to work out what's going on. They dealt with it in the second half. Scotland have won at Twickenham since 1983, but there is one member of the current squad who has a 100% record there, thanks to a victory 8 years ago in the English Schools Cup final. And Hugh Jones is sure that winning that match can help him prepare for Saturday's Calcutta Cup clash, even if he was just a teenage scrum half back then. I played in the 2009 Under-15 Cup final for Millfield against Judd School from Tunbridge, the centre said yesterday. We got a good win. I didn't manage to get on the score sheet. I was playing scrum half, and I've got the medal at home somewhere. That was massive to win that and play there. It was all the under-15 and under-18s Vase and Cup finals, one after the other, so there was a fairly big crowd, maybe a couple of thousand. There will be around 40 times that attendance for this week's Six Nations Championship, but Jones sees no reason why he and the rest of Scotland's squad should feel intimidated either by the venue or the occasion, or the fact that they've not won at Twickenham for so long. After all, they had not won their first game in the Championship since 2006, but they still beat Ireland at Murrayfield, and they had not managed to defeat Wales since 2007, but got the better of the Welsh too 10 days ago. Going into a game where it is uncharted territory, you haven't won down there before, that can have a negative effect, he said. A lot of what we've done recently has changed that mindset. We believe we can win tight games against opposition we haven't beaten before. Going into this game, the guys will be quite positive about it. It's an exciting opportunity. Breaking these small records definitely has an effect. It gives you more belief as you go on that you can keep going and breaking these runs. I think traditionally, not just England but other teams too, might have gone into the Six Nations thinking Scotland might be an easy game. Over the last couple of years, and this season especially, I think we've managed to change that mindset. Going down there, I don't think they'll be thinking this is going to be an easy game. The 34 years thing has not been spoken about much really. Obviously, that was before quite a few of us were even around, so I think this is a different era, different team, and I don't think we need to think much about that. It won't affect us, that sort of stat. The article was by Stuart Bathgate. Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Sport, tennis. Jamie Murray lands doubles title in Acapulco. The article is by Hayley Milne. Jamie Murray combined with Bruno Soares of Brazil to secure their first ATP doubles title of 2017 at the Abierto Mexicano Telquel in Acapulco. They beat John Isner and Feliciano Lopez 6-3, 6-3, and it was the fourth title since the pair had teamed up last year. We did well to win the first match this week against Chilik Mektic because we were down for most of the match tie-break, but that's what often happens in doubles. You squeeze through the first match and go on to win the tournament, Murray told reporters after the win. Today was a difficult match, a lot of good serving. We knew we weren't going to get loads of chances, but we were able to take the ones we had. Sam Querrey, meanwhile, became the first American champion at the Abierto Mexicano Telquel after an upset victory over second seed Rafael Nadal in Acapulco. Nadal had entered the match with a perfect 14 wins from 14 matches in the tournament, following his title wins in 2005 and 2013, winning all of the 28 sets he had played, but was no match for Querrey as he ran out a 6-3, 7-6, 7-3 victor for his 9th career title. The first set went with serve for the first 6 games, before Querrey went on an 11-point run and secured the lone break in the set to go 5-3 up. A forehand winner from his second set point wrapped up the set. Nadal played with more aggression in the second set, and Querrey had to save 5 break points at 3-4, 3 of which he did with aces. Nadal wilted first in the tie-break, as 2 baseline errors put wide allowed Querrey to take a 6-3 lead, and a long forehand from Nadal gave the American victory. At the Brazil Open, Pablo Cuevas beat top seed Pablo Carrento Busta in straight sets to reach the final. Third seed Cuevas won 6-3, 7-6, 7-2 and will meet second seed Albert Ramos Vinolas after he got the better of Yoa Souza 6-7, 5-7, 7-5, 6-2. The article was by Hayley Milne. Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Sport, golf. Dustin Johnson enjoyed the high life off the course, now he's enjoying it on the course too. The article is by Nick Roger. When it comes to new technology, your correspondent tends to have a bumbling habit of embracing the latest advances and innovations with a kind of excruciating awkwardness not seen since Captain Hook embarked on a spectacularly ill-advised experimentation with contact lenses. In many ways, it's almost a daily miracle that I managed to start up the laptop without some form of calamitous industrial incident. Perhaps I should give up fancy inventions for Lent, I pondered out loud. Perhaps it would be better if you gave up the Tuesday column for 40 days, muttered the sports editor with a grumbling sense of wishful purpose. Funnily enough, his suggestion seemed to attract such a surgeon backing, there's now a bloke from the Gambling Commission snooping around the office and looking into suspiciously irregular betting habits. As far as golf is concerned, there is plenty of smart money being flung on form horse Dustin Johnson as the build-up to the Masters hurtles along. It's hardly a surprise. The 32-year-old's victory in the WGC Mexico Championship was his second success in a row and kept him firmly tethered to the top of the world rankings. Johnson has been born again since finally capturing his first major in last season's US Open, and this latest run of form simply underlines his redemption. It wasn't that long ago, of course, that many were wondering if Johnson's potential would ever be fully realised, as he locked himself away in a self-imposed exile and sought professional help for personal challenges I have faced. There were tales of failed drugs tests, suspensions, affairs with the wives of other PGA Tour players, and a kind of gung-ho approach to partying and extracurricular activities that would have made a touring rock band look like a gathering of representatives from the temperance movement. Having elevated himself to the top of the global order for the first time in his career, with victory in the Genesis Open a couple of weeks ago, Johnson clearly has a head for heights and looks utterly at ease in the rarefied air. He became only the fifth player after Ian Woosnam, David Duval, Vijay Singh and Adam Scott to win their first event since becoming the number one. Leading from the front is never easy. Clambering your way to the top of golf's metaphorical mountain is the ultimate reward for conquest and consistency, but staying there can leave you out of puff and in an anguish-laden lather. It seems you need more than breathing apparatus and a few hearty slabs of Kendal mint cake to deal with this giddy peak. Jason Day, the Australian who had occupied the world number one spot for 47 weeks until Johnson dunted him off his perch, talked at length about the strains and pressures that come with being the man to catch. "I've never been more stressed in my life than right now," he once said. "It's just because being number one in the world, having a lot of expectations on you, having to practice so hard to keep that number one spot, trying to win as many tournaments as I can, puts a lot of stress and pressure on your shoulders." It appears even old Atlas would be creaking and groaning under the weight of various expectations and demands. Johnson, who has won 4 times, finished second twice and has a brace of thirds in the 16 events he has played since winning last year's US Open, is well aware that his lofty position brings its burdens. But given that he tends to adopt the casual laid-back air of a jazz quartet meandering through a few smoky late-night arrangements, his nonchalant shrugging demeanour will no doubt help him deal with all the scrutiny, attention and pressures as the campaign unfolds. Power, touch and temperament? It's a profitable trinity of golfing attributes. Johnson certainly enjoyed the high life during those wayward years off the course. Now he's enjoying the high life on it too. And another thing. Golf has never been an exact science. In my case, it's more a reckless experiment. Among the many welcome proposals for changes to the rules of golf last week, the possibility of giving broad allowance to distance measuring devices, DMDs, was not one of them. Judgment and feel is all part of the game's alluring austerity, not gadgetry. It can be a common scene. Player walks up to the ball, trudges over to a yardage marker, comes back to the ball, rummages around for a DMD, takes a measurement, puts DMD away, leafs through a yardage book and paces out the yardage before finally addressing the ball. The end result of this meticulous preparation? A 7-iron straight into the bunker. Being something of a crusty Luddite, DMDs are just another addition to golf's plootering paraphernalia. The article was by Nick Roger.
This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Opinion. The hard facts on council funding. Everyone expects this year's local government elections to lead to some serious changes in the makeup of Scotland's councils. But whoever ends up running them will face an intimidating entry. A long-term decline in funding, increasing pressure on services, and greater responsibility in a range of areas are just a few of the issues making work of the councils more complicated, less predictable and more expensive. It does not look good. The Accounts Commission has been warning about this situation for some time, and its latest report does not hold back. At the heart of the problem, it says, are two conflicting trends: the 9.3% reduction in Scottish Government funding since 2010-11 and the increased pressure on services, particularly social care, in 8 council areas. The total aged over 75 is expected to double by 2039. The result of this pincer movement, less money and more demand, is that local government finances are in a perilous state, with councils making deep cuts that are disproportionately felt by the most disadvantaged. However, the Accounts Commission also says that some councils are still not doing enough to change the way they work or plan for a different future. One extraordinary fact in its report is that only 14 of Scotland's 32 councils have long-term financial strategies. The Commission also says that in many cases there are no systems in place for monitoring staff levels after redundancies, or how a reduction in staff will affect the ability to deliver services. Many councils have also tried to limit the damage by increasing charges or focusing their cuts on services that are used more by the better off, which the Commission says is neither sufficient nor sustainable. The Scottish Government has not helped the matters by piling the pressure on councils in a number of different areas. Not only has it made deep cuts to council funding, ministers have also forced councils to take on more expensive responsibilities, such as the integration of health and social care, albeit with some extra cash. Government policies, such as the council tax freeze, now finally unfrozen, and the guaranteed minimums on teaching staff, have also narrowed the ability of councils to improve and come up with their own strategies on how to cope. There are a number of ways that councils could help themselves, and they should heed the Commission's warning that they need long-term strategies to help them plan and prioritise. They also need to overcome their intransigence on sharing services across borders, or be forced to, and ensure that they are achieving value for money in the services they provide. However, in the longer term, councils can only do so much, in a world in which the government controls most of their funding. Councils need to be better at managing their finances and cannot ignore the warnings from the Accounts Commission. But ultimately, an ageing population means more council services that can care for people, and that means more money to pay for them. Councils must do what they can, but there is a fact that the government will have to face sooner or later. Councils need more, not less. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Opinion. Walking through quicksand in quest to keep our school in the community. By Paula Spears, Keep St Joseph's in Milngavie campaign. It all began for us when East Dunbartonshire Council set out plans to merge St Joseph's Primary in Milngavie with a primary in Bearsden, meaning that for the first time in more than a century, the umbilical cord that had connected the school to its local community was in danger of being broken. This was despite the fact that other schools had fewer pupils than St Joseph's, and that its school building was deemed to be robust and fit for purpose for many years to come. We have evolved from half a dozen parents fighting to save a school from closure into a campaign that has brought our wider community together, focused on developing an alternative solution to enabling our children to continue to be educated in their local community. At the heart of our proposal is that St Joseph's would continue to operate within the state system. We wouldn't want it any other way. But parents deserve a bigger say. What we're asking from the Scottish Government is that they use our school as a pilot scheme and give this very willing community a chance to show that we can make it work. 3 years on, the optimism from our parents and wider community has begun to turn to disappointment and frustration at the lack of any real response to our proposal. We were told in the first instance that the delay was because our case cuts across a number of policy areas. The small matter of elections and new ministers had also impacted. To summarise, over the past few years we have met twice with the First Minister, 2 Education Ministers, and a team of senior civil servants and government advisers. Crucially, we've also provided detailed responses to specific questions. We do appreciate, of course, that the wheels of government move slower than we might like. However, surely Scottish Government needs to balance the pace of change with the impact locally of no decision making. We were given reassurances by John Swinney in June that we wouldn't need to wait anywhere near another 6 months. He also spent time at the meeting outlining the scope and timeline for both the governance review and the upcoming funding review, and yet made the promise to come back to us with its views within that timescale. We have then heard little of note until last week. We read in the media that any further action was to be delayed until after the local government elections. Since it looked like we were getting some level of interest from the Scottish Government, our school has had a number of parents expressing interest in transferring their children into St Joseph's. Meanwhile, East Dunbartonshire Council has taken away the lease for the Tuesday Club, who have been using our school for almost 40 years. This has further fueled the voices from our community, keen to move towards our goal of running our school, in collaboration with our community and away from local authority control. Our partnership nursery and wraparound out-of-school care is also at increasing risk of closure. We couldn't agree more with the Chief Executive of the Day Nurseries Association, Scotland, who called for third and private sector nurseries to be part of our childcare provision in our communities. Nursery provision is extremely limited in Milngavie, and our council has put our partnership nursery at risk. We want to incorporate it into our model. In the early days of our engagement with Scottish Government, some within our group expressed cynicism that the SNP was seriously considering our proposal. For many of us, though, we took the interest at face value and responded comprehensively to the requests for further information. Not only were we given meetings at highest level, but we were encouraged by the requests for further detail. Not only did we invest our own time in working up our proposal, but we also worked to engage with other partners. For us, this is not about approval or not of a business case. It is hope for a community. Whatever happens, we can look each other in the eye and comfort ourselves that whatever the outcome, we couldn't have fought any harder to keep our children from the opportunity, indeed their right, to be taught in their local community. This article by Paula Spears. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Opinion. Government should be ashamed of this chronic pain scandal. Dorothy Grace, Elder, is to be commended on her exposé of the scandal and shame in the treatment of chronic patients in Scotland. The scandal of how long they wait to be treated and the shame of the government's inaction on this issue is outrageous. Ms Elder revealed that only 15.9% of patients are treated within 18 weeks. As someone whose late husband suffered from chronic pain, I can assure readers that behind those figures lies a whole world of misery. The staff at pain clinics are dedicated, hard-working and caring individuals who are fighting an uphill battle, treating not only the pain but everything that comes with it, while constantly short-staffed. Chronic pain wears people down. It restricts physical movement. It causes depression. Friends and family stand by, feeling inadequate, as they see their loved ones worn down and made old before their time. Would any government minister like to stand up in Holyrood and make their speeches or appear at press conferences while in constant pain? Would they even manage that for magical 18 weeks, let alone any longer? And what is the government's reply to Ms Elder's exposé? We do not collect chronic pain waiting time information for return appointments, and the waiting time data is developmental. Weasel words. Shame, shame on the Scottish Government. No one denies that there are competed pressures on health services and the dedicated staff. But shame on the government for that reply. How about, we apologise to all the pain patients in Scotland for having let you down. We will employ more staff. and we will make sure the figures are compiled as clearly as possible so we can monitor this properly to ensure patients' waiting times come down. No one expects miracles overnight, but the common decency of an apology, a recognition that you have done wrong and a promise to put things right, would be the mature response. How sad that we do not have a government with that decency and maturity. Ms Elder has exposed a national scandal for patients and a government with no shame. What a sad day for all of us. In 1984, Orwell wrote, "Of pain you could wish only one thing, that it should stop. In the face of pain there are no heroes." The Herald's timely and excellent investigation into chronic pain services in Scotland reveals a system which simply isn't coping with the scale and the intensity of the problem. For many people living with the consequences, this is their dystopia. Daily experience of chronic pain has a huge impact on individuals' physical and mental health. We also know that along with fatigue, it's the main barrier to employment for people with arthritis. Indeed, in a forthcoming Arthritis Care Scotland report, more than 2/3 of people living with arthritis tell us that pain impacts on their ability to work. For improvement to happen in this area, we can't afford to window dress the issues. We need honesty about the real waiting times figures, but we also need to acknowledge that the solutions will mostly be found and funded locally. While the Glasgow-based National Treatment Centre for Patients with Chronic Pain is a vital service, the vast majority of people need access to other, more local support. In this, the role of new health and social care integration authorities is critical, and there is an urgent need to engage these bodies in debate. Angela Donaldson-Bruce, Director, Arthritis Care Scotland, Edward House, 283 West Campbell Street, Glasgow. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Opinion. A tribute and a warning on the long fight for equality. Anyone passing number 42 Woodstock Road in London in the next few days may notice that a small plaque has appeared on the front wall of the house. But how many will recognise the name on the plaque? Mary MacArthur. As historians of the trade unionism will know, MacArthur was a campaigner for working women. She fought for equal pay in munitions factories during First World War, and campaigned against sweated labour, which saw women work horrendously long hours for slave labour pay, and as such is credited with beginning the long fight for the minimum wage. It's entirely fitting that English Heritage has recognised her with one of its famous blue plaques. However, the fact that MacArthur's name is still relatively unknown is a reflection of the fact that significant female figures in history often do not get the recognition that is enjoyed by their male counterparts. The Royal Bank of Scotland, for example, has only just started to feature women on their notes. Most recently the poet and novelist Nan Shepherd, who appears on the new £5 notes. It's also extraordinary there is still a need for the cause Mary MacArthur fought for. MacArthur's great hope was for equal pay, and yet only last month new figures showed that women in full-time jobs are still being paid an average of 6.2% less than men doing the equivalent job. None of this is likely to change until more women are in leadership roles across the country, and on that too, there has been a depressing lack of progress. A study in the last few days revealed that across business, politics, the public sector and the media, only 27% of the top jobs are filled by women. Recognising the work of extraordinary female figures on banknotes and blue plaques could well help to make a difference, by celebrating the pioneers of equality and achievement. But the new blue plaque at number 42 Woodstock Road is also a reminder of how much is still left to do. Mary MacArthur achieved so much in the cause of equality, but nearly 100 years after her death, would she be struck by how little has changed? This article by Herald View.
Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Business. Mega merger fuels share price surge. This article is by Scott Wright. The mega merger of Standard Life and Aberdeen Asset Management has added nearly £600 million to the combined market value of the two institutions by last night, as investors signalled their approval of one of the biggest deals in Scottish corporate history. Shares in Standard Life closed up 6%, adding £431.6 million to its market capitalisation, and Aberdeen rose 4%, swelling its worth by £158.4 million, as details of the giant merger were announced. The share price hikes swelled the value of the merged entity to nearly £12 billion. The combined company, which is still to be named, will operate in 80 countries, with more than £660 billion worth of assets under management, making it one of the biggest asset managers in the world. Keith Skeoch and Martin Gilbert, the respective leaders of Standard Life and Aberdeen, emphasised the complementary nature of the deal, with Aberdeen's strength in emerging markets dovetailing with the Edinburgh pension giant's presence in developed markets. But analysts pointed to significant overlap between the two areas, such as multi-asset fixed income and property investment products. There are fears hundreds of jobs in Scotland are at risk after the company said they would be looking to make £200 million worth of cost savings in the next 3 years. Mr Skeoch and Mr Gilbert refused to be drawn on job cuts in a media briefing yesterday morning, although the Aberdeen boss said reports that as many as 1,000 jobs were on the block were grossly overestimating the risk. Standard Life has a workforce of around 5,000 in Scotland, mostly in Edinburgh, and 6,500 globally, while Aberdeen employs 800 of its 2,800 headcount in Scotland. "We're not just going to go down the road of discussing job cuts," Mr Gilbert said. "This is, as Keith Skeoch said, about revenues and synergies as well. Obviously there is overlap, but look, we just can't talk about job losses." Mr Skeoch admitted that there will be some synergies as the two organisations are integrated, but declared that jobs could be created if the two companies' long track record of growth is maintained. "At the end of the day, as we both indicated, this is a strategic deal," Mr Skeoch said. "It's a deal for the long term. It provides a UK and Scottish powerhouse in asset management, and when we are successful, as I am sure we will be generating good long-term growth, and that will generate a substantial increase in jobs and opportunities for our people." The merger comes as active fund managers come under increasing price pressure from passive funds, with analysts raising the prospect of further consolidation taking place in light of the deal. It also comes amid a difficult run for Aberdeen, which has reported 15 consecutive quarters of net outflows from its funds. The investment house said there had been signs of recovery in its emerging market funds in the third quarter of 2016, which Mr Gilbert noted had been derailed after sentiment was unsettled by the Trump victory in November's US election. Keith Baird, financial services analyst at Cantor Fitzgerald, declared that this looks like a defensive deal in light of the challenges facing active managers from passive investing, pricing and regulatory pressures. But Mr Gilbert, who underlined his faith in the long-term prospects for emerging markets, said that Aberdeen had not been placed under pressure from its biggest shareholders, Mitsubishi UFJ and Lloyds Banking Group, to do the deal. Noting that Aberdeen is carrying £500 million in cash and still makes around £300 million in annual profits, he declared, "We didn't have to do the deal. We did it because we genuinely believe the combined company will be better." Both company leaders played down criticism from some quarters over the decision of Mr Skeoch and Mr Gilbert to become joint leaders of the combined group, which will see Aberdeen shareholders own approximately 1/3 of the merged entity and Standard Life investors around 2/3. Mr Gilbert, who observed that he has known Mr Skeoch for 30 years, said it was pretty prevalent in financial services and global equities for companies to have joint chief executives. Mr Skeoch said, "One of the things that makes us both excited about the deal is absolutely the scale. £660 billion of assets, clients in 80 countries around the world. There is more than enough for both of us to do." Colin Chiensky, Chief Market Strategist at CMC Markets, claimed it looked like a better deal for Standard Life than Aberdeen, noting that Aberdeen's stock had dropped back below 300p after reaching 310p yesterday morning. He added, "This suggests the street doesn't expect to see another bidder and may not be happy that there is no premium and no cash component to this friendly deal, a sign that there wasn't much demand for Aberdeen and that Standard probably got a good price for it." This article was by Scott Wright. Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Business. Herald Entrepreneur. Global logistics is a family affair for Mika. The article is by Marianne Taylor. When their most valuable or precious possessions need transported from one side of the world to the other, people understandably get a bit nervous. Which is exactly the reason Mika Logistics put so much effort into providing the most reliable service possible at the end of the process. The Paisley-based family business has been dealing with air freight for the last 14 years, ensuring whatever is entrusted to them gets to its destination on time and in one piece. We deal with a really wide range of cargo, explains General Manager Forrest Cruikshank. It can be anything from computer parts to whiskey, someone's entire life if they're moving to another country, or their beloved dog or cat. One of the more unusual things I delivered was the HIV virus, which was being transported to researchers at the West of Scotland Science Park. That was quite a strange feeling. If someone is transporting something by air freight, then it is very important to them, and they're willing to pay a lot of money to ensure it happens as smoothly and safely as possible. We never lose sight of that when we're dealing with the items. Cruikshank has been there since the beginning, when his long-term friends, husband and wife directors Mary and Ian Anderson set up the firm. The trio had worked in the airport and freight business for years and knew their accumulated knowledge and experience meant they could provide a competitive service. Since then, they've grown to become one of the most well-regarded names in the business. Trust is definitely an important part of running any business, and it's certainly something we take seriously, says Cruikshank. Because of the security issues around air travel and freight, all our drivers have to be vetted and specially trained. But they are also representing us, and even when the unforeseen happens or customers are rude, they have to be professional and be able to think on their feet. They also need a sense of humour. The business now operates out of the storage vault facility in Paisley, just a stone's throw from Glasgow Airport. According to director Mary Anderson, the move there helped the company grow. The premises we rented before were much more expensive, she explains, but at Storage Vaults we got a modern office and great storage facilities at a fraction of the cost, and that allows us to concentrate on growing and investing in the business. It's also a really friendly place to work, with a really interesting and diverse range of businesses, from accountants to architects, that we can network with. Anderson says anyone looking to run their own business must prepare themselves for the inevitable ups and downs, not to mention the sleepless nights. We've had lots of unexpected things thrown at us over the years, including 2 serious floods where we lost all our vehicles, she says. And of course, because the buck stops with you, it's you that has to deal with the phone calls from drivers in the middle of the night and at weekends when there's a problem. Running your own business is a big responsibility, especially because it is not only your livelihood that's at stake, but that of all your employees. But she says there are upsides too, even when your business partner is your husband. I get to choose my own hours, which works well with my family, adds Anderson, and Ian and I work in different spheres of the business, meaning we have defined roles. We often talk about work at home, which is fine as long as he doesn't moan too much. We work really hard, but I'd say it's all worthwhile in the end. Running your own business gives you a real sense of satisfaction. This article was by Marianne Taylor.
This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. News. Church and community leaders warn of subtle sectarianism in Scotland's independence debate. Article by Jerry Braden. Sectarianism has become infused with Scotland's constitutional debate, with assumptions made about political positions based on religious and cultural background, church and community leaders have claimed. In a new report on ongoing efforts to tackle religious bigotry, it has been claimed that senior figures within the main Christian churches believe a subtle form of sectarianism has crept into the mainstream politics on the back of the referendum. The academic appointed by the Scottish Government to advise on the centuries-old problem has said that while there is no evidence for religious polarisation based on the independence issue, there was a potential for sectarianism and politics to be conflated at a localised level. Dr. Duncan Morrow said that during evidence gathering for his report, while there had been much symbolic and practical work between the two main churches, at the same time the perception that this question could take on sectarian avenues remains. Dr. Morrow said the fear that the independence debate had taken on a sectarian dimension was expressed by a number of people, from within the churches and the wider community. All the political parties did not bring any element of sectarianism to their campaigns, and were very keen not to do so. The potential exists that they, sectarianism and the constitutional issue, can feed each other at a local level, and that fear is there. The churches suggest that debates in certain communities were flavoured by sectarianism. We found no evidence that that was reproduced. But one source said it's true and been empirically measured that people from within the Catholic tradition were more inclined to vote yes, and those of a Church of Scotland background were more likely to be no voters. But that's not to say this motivates sectarian attitudes or perpetuating religious intolerance. Ahead of the September 2014 Scotland referendum, pre-eminent historian Professor Sir Tom Devine had said that voters of an Irish Catholic background had in recent years moved away from their traditional support of Labour, and were more likely to vote SNP and support independence. Last week the Herald reported how one prominent figure within Labour accused the SNP of attempting to stir sectarianism after an MP wore ashes on her head at a Westminster committee meeting. The clashes in Glasgow's George Square in the immediate aftermath of the referendum were linked with loyalists, while some on the fringes of the independence movement routinely connect no voters with groups such as the Orange Order. A spokesman for the Catholic Church said there is no justification for religious intolerance in any circumstances, and Scotland's practising Christians are last likely to exhibit it. This article by Jerry Braden. This article from the Evening Times on the 7th of March 2017. News. Mother of Scots keeper Sarah Maclay, killed by tiger, says South Lakes Safari Zoo should close. The mother of a Scots zookeeper, mauled to death by a tiger at a Cumbria wildlife park, says it should be shut down, as the owner lost a bid to renew its licence. David Gill's claim for a licence to run South Lakes Safari Zoo in Dalton and Furness was unanimously refused by Barrow councillors, after they heard there were some 486 animal deaths at the zoo between January 2013 and September 2016. And Fiona Maclay, whose daughter Sarah, 24, from Glasgow, was killed at the zoo 4 years ago, says the park should be closed, as there continues to be concerns about how it's been run. Mr Gill has handed management of South Lakes over to the Cumbria Zoo Company Limited, and said he plans to sell the zoo to that group as well. The zoo's company application for a licence to run the park, which houses 1,500 animals, including tigers, giraffes and rare birds, is yet to be heard. I think it should close, because this new company is formed by existing staff, said Ms Maclay from West Lothian, who said there remains concerns about the way the zoo is being run. And that's in the circumstances where animals are being treated poorly. It would seem that nothing has changed there. I would hope that the zoo would be closed to the public until things are sorted out. 7 healthy lion cubs and 5 young baboons were also euthanised because there was not enough room for them. A sloped yard, finished with smooth instead of rough concrete, caused a giraffe to slip to its death. The distressing catalogue of injuries and illnesses, endured by a wide range of species at the site, has been branded the worst seen in 60 years by the national campaigning charity, the Captive Animal Protection Society. Mary Taylor, of the Captive Animal Protection Society, also called for closure, saying our visit to the zoo, combined with the zoo's inspector's reports, shows high death rates of animals in ill health, and a lack of understanding at the zoo. The zoo was fined $297,500 and ordered to pay £150,000 prosecution costs over the next 10 years over health and safety breaches connected to the death of Ms Maclay. Mr Gill's solicitor, Steve Walker, said he no longer wanted to run the zoo, but did not want to see it closed before new company Cumbria Zoo Limited had a licence approved. In a statement on its Facebook page, Cumbria Zoo Company Limited, which now runs the zoo, said it was making a separate licence application. The statement said, "We are aware of the decision to refuse Mr Gill's application. Safari Zoo remains open, and CZCL need your support. Barrow Council inspectors had recommended to the Council as early as January last year that a renewal of the zoo licence should be refused unless there was a shake-up of management, while revealing a catalogue of animal welfare and safety concerns during inspections. It was decided that while a licence expired in June, it would be extended to give the zoo operators time to meet the demands of the Council over its safety and management. But the papers also revealed concern that then it had become apparent that Mr Gill was overriding decisions made by the management team, adding that it is of deep concern should the licence be renewed in Mr Gill's name. A statement by the Cumbria Zoo Company said it had developed and mitigated many of the welfare concerns that were inherited when we took over. They added, "We acknowledge that we have a long way to go, and we never accept that we cannot improve our animal welfare provision. It is core to what we believe and what we do. However, words mean nothing. They're a philosophy and an idea. That's why we believe in action rather than looking to blame individuals or groups that may have led to the recent historical situation reported in the press. Our actions demonstrate our commitment through what we've achieved in the last few months, and through the difficult process of reviewing where we were, what had to be done to make short-term gains in animal welfare, and plan for the future, ensuring as we develop and welcome guests through our doors, we can be proud of what we've achieved and know we have provided and continue to improve upon optimal animal welfare. We believe in the zoo, and ensuring our animals are well looked after in a safe and suitable home, and thank everyone for the support demonstrated by our many visitors, friends and colleagues over what has been a difficult week." This article is by Martin Williams. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. News. Calls to come clean over Scott's job losses in Standard Life Aberdeen merger. The deal that would create one of Britain's biggest asset managers, overseeing about £660 billion in funds, has raised concerns that hundreds of jobs will be axed, under moves to save around £200 million a year. Questions have also been raised over how Keith Scotch, Chief Executive of Standard Life, and Martin Gilbert, Chief Executive of Aberdeen, will work together as co-chief executives governing the enlarged Scottish-based company. The new firm will site its headquarters in Scotland, and Mr Gilbert said the move will enable the business to compete effectively on the global stage. Edinburgh-based Standard Life employs more than 8,000 staff, and Aberdeen Asset Management almost 3,000. Following the merger, a spokesman insisted the aim was to grow the businesses and create a powerhouse in asset management, capable of competing with its huge US rivals. 3 years ago, Aberdeen Asset Management bought Ignis Asset Management, the Scottish Widows Fund Management arm of Lloyds Banking Group, resulting in the bulk of its 250 Glasgow-based staff being made redundant. Scottish Labour leader Kezia Dugdale, who met with Standard Life in Edinburgh on Monday morning, sought assurances that jobs will be protected. She said financial services are one of the powerhouses of the Scottish economy. If this merger sees Scotland punch even further above our weight, then that would be a great thing. However, reports of a 10% cut in the workforce is concerning. These are two huge employers in two of Scotland's most important cities, and job cuts would be bad news for the economy. Patrick Harvey, MSP, the Scottish Greens Finance and Economy spokesman, the overarching priority should be to protect the existing staff, as the main reason suggested the merger was to grow the newly created business. Scottish Conservative Shadow Economy Secretary Dean Lockhart said the merger has the potential to ensure there is a genuine global player in fund management with headquarters in Scotland. A Scottish Government spokesman said the proposed merger is a potential vote of confidence in Scotland's financial services sector. We will be engaging with both companies as the merger progresses to discuss employment and investment in Scotland, the spokesman said. We welcome the intention to grow the business in Scotland and to build on the expertise and skills of both companies and strengthen Scotland's reputation for fund and asset management. The Scottish Government has been in contact with both companies, and as plans for the merger are confirmed, the Scottish Government stand ready to support the new business and their employees. Sir Jerry Grimstone, the Standard Life chairman, first made suggestion in 2009 and approached Aberdeen Chief Executive Martin Gilbert about merging their businesses. At the time, Mr Gilbert put off the flirtation, wanting to remain independent with a strategy for growth of Aberdeen, the investment business he co-founded and has led since 1983. Grimstone will now chair the now enlarged company. Standard Life, which is based in Edinburgh, was founded in 1825 as a life insurance company and moved into dedicated asset management with the creation of Standard Life Investments in 1998. It is now a global company with 1.2 million shareholders across 50 countries. By the 1950s, they became the largest life assurance company in Scotland and have since grown to serve millions of customers around the world. In 1991, Aberdeen Asset Management was listed on the London Stock Exchange under the name Aberdeen Trust plc and now has more than 2,500 staff across 37 offices in 25 countries. It manages assets of £302.7 billion and is considered one of Europe's largest public pure-play investment managers. Gilbert, 61, divides his time between Aberdeen and London, as well as overseeing the international operations of the group. One of the best-known Scots in London's Square Mile, he was born in Malaysia and is educated at Robert Gordon's College, Aberdeen, and the University of Aberdeen. He has a long CV of current and former board appointments, including being deputy chairman of satellite TV giant Sky, as well as formerly chairing First Group. He has expanded the group relentlessly through a 34-year deal spree, although it nearly went bust in the early 2000s after the Split Capital Investment Trust scandal. This article by Martin Williams. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. News. Facebook under fire over failure to remove sexualised pictures of children. Facebook has come under fire for allegedly failing to remove sexualised pictures of children from its website. Damien Collins, chairman of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee, expressed grave doubts at the social media giant's ability to moderate content. The BBC said it used Facebook's report button to flag up 100 photos on the website, but 82 were not removed, with an automated response saying they did not breach community standards. The images, including under-16s in sexualised poses, pages aimed at paedophiles, and an image appearing to be taken from a child abuse video. Among the items not permitted under Facebook's community standards is sexually suggestive content. When examples of the images were sent to Facebook, the company instead reported the journalists to police for sharing the pictures, the broadcaster reported. The BBC also said Facebook failed to remove the profiles of 5 convicted paedophiles. Mr Collins said, "I find it very disturbing. I find that content unacceptable. I think it raises the question of how can users make an effective complaints to Facebook about content that is disturbing, shouldn't be on the site, and have confidence that that will be acted upon." Anne Longfield, the Children's Commissioner for England, said she was very disappointed by the revelations. This article is unattributed. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Politics. Alex Salmond was wrong on oil as a bonus claim. SNP Independence Review Chief Andrew Wilson admits. Andrew Wilson, who is leading an SNP review updating the case for independence, admitted North Sea income was baked into spending plans, rather than treated as a windfall. The mantra, oil as a bonus, was a key part of the Yes campaign in 2014, and was used to rebut criticism that an independent Scotland would be overly reliant on a volatile industry. The phrase was used by then First Minister Mr Salmond, his then Deputy Nicola Sturgeon, by then Finance Secretary John Swinney, then Energy Minister Fergus Ewing, and by the SNP's then Treasury spokesman at Westminster, Stuart Hosey. The Scottish Government's White Paper on Independence predicted oil would raise up to £7.9 billion, or 12% of the public finances in the first year outside the UK, 2016-17. Crucially, oil was assumed to keep Scotland's deficit a manageable 3.2% of GDP. However, the subsequent oil price slump has cut North Sea revenue to zero, and Scotland's deficit last year was 9.5% of GDP, more than double that of the UK. Ms Wilson, a former SNP MSP, who Ms Sturgeon appointed to the chair the SNP's Growth Commission 6 months ago, told the BBC the bonus not a bias line had been false. His commission had therefore assumed oil revenue would stay zero after independence, and any North Sea cash would be used as a proper windfall to be invested in long-term projects, rather than day-to-day spending. Tory Murdo Fraser said Mr Salmon's bluster and evasion in 2014 was finally exposed, and he should admit to trying to mislead people on oil. Labour's Jackie Baillie said the SNP had offered a rose-tinted fantasy of an independent Scotland's finances, which had been a figment of Alex Salmon's imagination. Scottish Lib Dem leader Willie Rennie said of course oil is not a bonus, and now it hardly raises any revenues at all, so we face a £15 billion black hole. An SNP spokesman said instead of rejoicing in the downturn affecting the North Sea oil industry and the jobs affected by it, the Scottish Tories should be lobbying for support for the industry in this week's UK budget. The North Sea industry will be an important one for years to come, but the biggest threat to Scotland's prosperity, jobs and livelihoods comes from a Tory hard Brexit, which threatens to take us off an economic cliff edge. This article by Tom Gordon. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Politics. Peers warn May that Brexit legislative process must have full parliamentary scrutiny and safeguard union. The House of Lords Constitution Committee warns Theresa May not to use the forthcoming Great Repeat Bill to avoid full parliamentary scrutiny. The legislation will scrap the European Communities Act, ending the legal authority of EU law in the UK. It will also transpose EU regulations into domestic law, crucially allowing them to be altered or removed once withdrawal has taken place. Lord Lang, the committee chairman, said it was important to get the safeguards right, particularly given the Brexit campaign's promise to take back control. The former Conservative Scottish Secretary explained it's inconceivable the bulk of it can be done in primary legislation, where there are major policy changes, for example, on immigration or customs law. Primary legislation would be needed. For the rest, there are something like 20,000 bits of EU legislation, which we'll have to bring back to the UK in one form or another, and we won't know precisely what they are finally until the negotiations are complete. The Scottish peer accepted most of the bill's provisions would have to be enacted through secondary legislation, while David Mundell, the Scottish Secretary, has indicated that he anticipates Holyrood would have to pass legislative consent motions to enable Westminster to legislate on devolved matters. Secondary legislation is not subject to the so-called Sewell Convention. If the former, then the devolved institutions will need to be appropriately consulted on amendments to EU law in areas that fall within their jurisdiction. If the latter, it's essential that the devolved institutions work closely with the UK government to ensure that EU law does not fall between the cracks of the respective jurisdictions, and that decisions on the repeal of adoption of domesticated EU law are taken in a way that has regard to the coherence of the Union. Lord Lang made clear he was optimistic that with goodwill on all sides, as well as proper scrutiny and consultation with interested parties, that the complicated process could be successfully completed. Asked if he believed the SNP leadership was pushing matters towards a constitutional crisis, Lord Lang added, "It would be incomprehensible for anybody to force some sort of crisis now, before negotiations have even started, and to claim that Brexit is the reason for them. That would be preposterous, and would be seen to be preposterous by the vast majority of the Scottish people." Stephen Gethins, the SNP Europe spokesman, said devolved administrations must be properly and officially formally involved when it comes to matters that fall within their competence. The increasing danger, however, is not powers for devolved administrations falling through the cracks, rather the risk of a Westminster power grab. Powers must come back to Holyrood and not stop in a centralised Westminster. This article by Michael Settle. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Politics. Non-candidate launches Greens local election campaign. The co-convener of the Scottish Greens has launched our party's local election campaign, despite quitting Edinburgh Council and deciding not to stand again in May. Maggie Chapman said more people than ever would have the chance to vote Green, with the party fielding 200 candidates compared to 80 in 2012. However, Ms Chapman will not be one of them. A City of Edinburgh councillor from 2007 to 2015, she quit to concentrate on getting elected as a North East List MSP last year, but was unsuccessful. The Greens have councillors in 5 of Scotland's 32 councils, but hope to extend their reach and say they could hold the balance of power in some authorities. Co-convener Patrick Harvey, MSP, said his party had shown commitment to local services, be securing an extra £160 million for councils and a budget deal with the SNP. He said it's this bold and constructive approach that more Green councillors will bring to our local authorities. Ms Chapman, whose 3-year term as Rector of Aberdeen University ends this year, said she would support candidates' campaigns as co-convener. This article by Tom Gordon. This article from the Herald Scotland on the 7th of March 2017. Politics. SNP face independence referendum at worst possible time, says former leader Gordon Wilson. Gordon Wilson also claims there had been vacuum and drift on campaigns planning and unpreparedness as the party focused on May's local elections instead of its core goal. SNP members were not children and urgently wanted answers about the issues which bedevilled the Yes campaign in 2014, such as currency, finance and trade, he said. A Eurosceptic, Mr Wilson also criticised the SNP's obsession with Europe, which he said risked making a yes vote synonymous with a non-deliverable return to EU membership. He said at best, a pro-EU strategy will minimise the yes vote and at worst fracture it. Speaking ahead of this week's SNP conference in Aberdeen, Mr Wilson urges Angus Robertson to give up leading the party's Westminster group to focus on leading the next campaign. Nicola Sturgeon has not yet called a second referendum. However, she has said one is all but inevitable if the UK government rejects her proposal for a bespoke Scottish Brexit deal. Mr Wilson, who led the SNP from 1979 to 1990, said he was against a swift referendum on the back of Brexit, but reluctantly recognised its apparent inevitability. He said the Scottish National Party must exercise extreme care if, as it appears, it is caught in a political vortex, and cannot avoid holding a second referendum on independence at the worst possible time. He went on, if I was in Nicola Sturgeon's position, I would ask Angus Robertson to step down temporarily as Westminster Party leader, and devote all his time and talents as SNP deputy leader to mastermind the coming campaign. Mr Wilson added, the danger exists that the SNP is in its obsession with Europe muddies the waters by emphasising that a yes vote is not just for independence, but to remain in the EU. In reality, EU membership is non-deliverable. The party should forget that over a third of yes supporters voted to leave the EU, and of the 2/3 who voted to remain in the EU, a substantial number will vote for the British Union. A new BMG poll showed only 1 in 4 Scots want a referendum before Brexit in 2019. Scottish Conservative Constitution spokesman Adam Tompkins said Angus Robertson can't take charge of a campaign that doesn't and shouldn't exist. His constituents would be furious if he dropped their interests at Westminster in exchange for more separate rabble-rousing. Labour MSP James Kelly added it's quite remarkable to hear a former SNP leader admit that EU membership for an independent Scotland is a fantasy. An SNP spokesperson said we are fully focused on protecting Scotland from the disastrous impact of a hard Tory Brexit, and still await the UK government's response to the serious compromise proposals put forward to keep Scotland in the European single market. This article by Tom Gordon.
Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Arts and Entertainment. The Lessons of a Theatrical Life. The article is by Neil Cooper. If Susan Wooldridge hadn't have grown up in an artistic household, she may not have gone on to become a distinguished star of stage and screen in era-defining TV drama The Jewel in the Crown, for which she was nominated for a BAFTA. This was an award Wooldridge went on to win as Best Supporting Actress in John Boorman's film Hope and Glory. Wooldridge's parents were actress Margaretta Scott and composer John Wooldridge, who exposed her and her brother Hugh, now a theatre director, to a world of culture that saw many bohemian types around their home. All of which sounds like the perfect grounding for playing Judith Bliss in the Citizens Theatre's forthcoming production of Noel Coward's play Hay Fever. Written in 1924 and first produced a year later, Coward's play is set over one lively weekend in the Bohemian Bliss family's country house, where they hold increasingly crazed court to assorted guests from a less hysterically inclined world. Together they become witnesses to the Bliss's indulgences. At the heart of these is Judith Bliss, an actress and the family matriarch who can transform any minor crisis into a drama on the grandest of scales. Judith thinks of herself as a grande dame of the theatre, says Wooldridge, but she's been retired for a year in this little place in the country, and she has no drama in her life anymore. She wants the glamour and she wants the glitz, so she has to create it for herself. For her, everything is a play, and she's not alive if she's not acting. Over more than 40 years in the business, this is a state of mind Wooldridge has seen firsthand. I wouldn't cast myself as a grande dame, but I've been in the business long enough to recognise that sort of behaviour, if you know what I mean. I've spent my whole life working with great actors, who have all been very talented, and they've all been generous and kind. It's the ones who aren't so talented who aren't so kind, because they've no confidence in what they do. I've only seen that once, and I'm certainly not going to name them, but there's something sad about it as well. There's also something in the play about a woman getting older. At one point, Judith's son says to her that she looks sad and beautiful, and she lives in this little bubble of glamour. The other thing I think is fantastically important about the play is that it's only a few years since the end of the First World War, and everyone still has a sense of loss and grief, so they have to flip things to try and put some gaiety back in their lives. Dominic Hill's co-production between the Cits and the Royal Lyceum Theatre, Edinburgh, where the show opens prior to its Glasgow run, won't be the first time Wooldridge has appeared in Coward's play. Back in 1984, not long before she was cast in the lavish TV series The Jewel in the Crown, Wooldridge played one of the Bliss House guests, nice but dim Jackie, in a TV production which featured Penelope Keith as Judith. Before, said Wooldridge, I was a guest in this very frightening house. Now I'm the owner of it, and that's absolutely riveting. It's fascinating to play someone as selfish and self-involved as Judith, who would never have an inkling why a poor little thing like Jackie is having this terrible time while she's having the time of her life. Isn't Coward clever to know women so well? Wooldridge had been acting for 12 years before she was given what she considers to be her big break after being cast as Daphne Manners in The Jewel in the Crown. While she had already played small television roles in the likes of The Naked Civil Servant alongside John Hurt, by the 1980s she had grown disillusioned. I wasn't getting the parts I wanted, said Wooldridge, so I decided to do some more training, which I did at the Lecoq School in Paris, and which gave me more confidence. Being lucky enough to be cast in The Jewel in the Crown meant I was recognised, not just in the street, but by people in the industry who were kind enough to ask me to do things without me having to sell myself from the off. While Hay Fever will be Wooldridge's first ever appearance at the Cits, her mother graced the Gorbals stage back in the 1940s, when she played Lady Macbeth opposite Duncan MacRae in a production that also featured a young Stanley Baxter in the cast. I always remember my mother mentioning it, says Wooldridge, because Duncan MacRae broke his leg before the first night, and the director went on in his place. Then when he came back, his leg made a knocking sound as he walked, which created a really eerie effect. Wooldridge's mother was half Scottish, so when Wooldridge comes across the border, it always feels like I'm coming home. I know that's sentimental, but it does, especially when you're working at the happiest theatre there is. Wooldridge's father died in 1958. My mother brought me up as a very brave single mum, she says, and I grew up with lots of people around the place, not the ones who are mentioned in Hay Fever, but people like them. The very first Judith Bliss was played by Marie Tempest, and my mother's very first job was with her, so there are lots of little threads of synchronicity growing on here. When we open Hay Fever, I'll be performing on the same stage as my mother did, and who knows, maybe the dressing room I'm in now was the one she used. While Wooldridge has carved out a distinguished career both on stage and screen, including turns as Lady Bracknell in The Importance of Being Earnest and an appearance at the Almeida last year as Uncle Vanya, unlike Judith, she is under no illusions how an actor's life can pan out. Sadly, there comes an inevitable point when you hit 50 when everything stops, she says. In some ways it's a tragedy, because you're at your most confident. Wooldridge's response was to start writing. At first she tried script writing, until her partner, actor and writer Andy de la Tour, suggested it might make a good novel. The Hidden Dance was published in 2009, and Wooldridge's fourth book is due out soon. Not that her acting work has dried up in any way. Prior to Hay Fever, Wooldridge spent 3 months in Spain filming the first season of Still Star-Crossed. Styled as a sequel to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the show focuses on Rosaline, who rejected Romeo, and Benvolio, and what happens when the pair are betrothed against their will in an attempt to end the interfamilial violence. In a cast that includes Anthony Head as Lord Capulet, Wooldridge plays the nurse. The series is produced by Shonda Rhimes, who created Grey's Anatomy. It's been extraordinary seeing how these big, sexy, glamorous series are made, Wooldridge says. Judith Bliss would undoubtedly approve. Hay Fever holds a mirror up to all of us, says Wooldridge. Through all of the laughter that comes from the play, there is a truth and an understanding of what lies behind it. It's like a fluffy souffle, and while that looks simple and a lot of fun, to make a really good souffle requires a lot of hard work. Hay Fever, Royal Lyceum Theatre, Edinburgh, from March the 10th to April the 1st. Citizens Theatre, Glasgow, from April the 5th to the 22nd. www.sits.co.uk and www.lyceum.org.uk. This article was by Neil Cooper. Herald Scotland on Tuesday the 7th of March 2017. Arts and Entertainment. Music Review. Vienna Tonkussler Orchestra at the Usher Hall in Edinburgh. It did not take long for the Vienna Tonkussler Orchestra to transport their audience to the wild and windy Hebridean Isle of Staffa during Sunday afternoon's concert. Mendelssohn's Hebrides Overture, Fingal's Cave, may open softly, but the Tonkussler's strings brimmed with underlying energy and mystery. Yet the highlight of the performance was the wistful clarinet solo from Christoph Moser, who was joined seamlessly by second clarinetist Stefan Vola for an enchanting duet. The orchestra continued to display their skill in Mozart's clarinet concerto. Although they reduced the size of a chamber orchestra, as is fitting for the piece, they still filled the Usher Hall's expansive space. Soloist Emma Johnston found projecting more difficult, however, though this was offset by the sweetness of her playing. Particularly exquisite were her changes in dynamics, which not only produced a change in volume, but an entirely different colour. Under their music director, Yutako Sado, the Tonkussler were excellent accompanists, giving Johnson the courage to play extremely quietly without risking being drowned out. This made for a magical passage during the second movement, when both orchestra and soloist achieved an unbelievable delicacy. The dramatic Symphony No. 1 in C minor by Brahms produced a drastic contrast. With the orchestra once again at their full force, Sado enticed a relentless drive for the first movement, but the greatest excitement was saved for the final movement, when Sado captured the slow introduction's uneasy sense of foreboding. After the stately reference to the Ode to Joy theme from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Sado let his orchestra off the leash. Free to play at their full power, including the gorgeously bold brass, the concert ended in glorious triumph. The article was by Hazel Rowland.
Well, that's all from today's edition of the Herald Scotland, brought to you from the volunteers of Q and Review Print Speaking to the Blind. Check out their website at www.qandreview.com.